Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto Will is your host. Today we have the honor of speaking to Clayvon Harris. She left a career of writing for television behind and returned to Philadelphia, where she planned to pursue a career in teaching. Easing in as a substitute, she was confronted by disruption and violence that undermined both the learning environment and her aspirations. Still hoping to contribute, she wrote an insightful first-hand account of the conditions and real-life challenges teachers and students face on a daily basis in her book called Sub, Inside the Notorious School of District of Philadelphia. Hello and welcome to Politics Done Right. Ms. Harris, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Alberto. Thank you so much for having me on.
I tell you what, I am excited to hear a little bit about what's in your book and what you found as a sub, because I think, first of all, let me just tell you something about what I think about teachers, and I've been preaching this for a very long time. I think teachers are represent the most important profession, bar none, because you all are the ones who move knowledge forward. Whether you're an engineer, I'm an engineer. Whether you're a lawyer, I have relatives that are lawyers, doctors, relatives that are doctors, etc. You are the ones who move knowledge forward. So I always find it problematic that we don't give the respect or the resources necessary for folks like you to get the job done. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself.
About me?
Yes.
Okay. So as you said, primarily I think of myself as a writer. Mm-hmm. That's what I've done for the majority of my life. When I was in college, there were two roads. I was thinking about teaching, I was thinking about writing, and I wound up going down the writing road. Spent a lot of time in ad agencies, in communication departments, had a chance to write for TV, et cetera, but eventually got to a point where it wasn't going the way I wanted to go, and I didn't feel fulfilled, and I felt like I was wasting the education that I had an opportunity to have. So I wanted to do something to contribute to help out the community, and I decided that I was going to become a teacher. At the time, I was living in Los Angeles. There, you can get emergency credentials. So I applied, and I was just on the verge of getting a classroom when it occurred to me that, I could actually go home and be near my family, and I could teach in Philadelphia. So I decided to come home, and then I discovered that Philadelphia doesn't do emergency credentials. So I needed to go back and get fully certified in order to teach, which takes about 2 years. And I was willing to do that, but at the time they said, but we need substitute teachers right now. So we would love for you to sign up and get out there in the pool, because we're really, really desperate. And so I thought that would give me an opportunity to see what was going on out in the schools, and I signed up.
Now, I want to go a little bit before that, because am I not hearing you undersell yourself? Weren't you a writer for TV shows, etc.?
I was. I had an opportunity to, I went to the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts for my master's degree. I went to Swarthmore College undergrad. And when I graduated from graduate school, I had an opportunity to work on a show called Living Single, a show called 704 Hauser, which was one of Norman Lear's shows. And I also worked on a show called For Your Love, and then did some freelances for Soul Food the series, Farscape. I also freelanced for Star Trek, Voyager. So that's what I was doing.
The reason I wanted to bring that up is you may kind of not play that up as big as it should, but usually when we have a lot of people that get themselves into that industry, the last thing they're going to think about is coming back home and teach. There's a special type of person that actually does that. So I think we need to put that part of the context into who you are, in my humble opinion. But now, as far as what you found when you went to Philadelphia, one of the things I think folks say is that I think somewhere you asserted that the children pretty much are set up to fail in these schools. Exactly what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that they're not actually getting the first-rate quality education that they need in order to succeed in life. And if you're not getting the education that you need to succeed, then that kind of sets you up for failure, you know, or for maintaining the status quo. So, you know, it's really hard. That, you know, the whole situation is very, very complicated. And I don't think that people are necessarily intentionally trying to destroy the lives of children or destroy their futures. But I think that there is a certain level of negligence and of not understanding the consequences of decisions that are made at the federal level, at state level. Everyone knows that resourcing, funding is an issue. Everyone knows this. They may not necessarily understand all the ins and outs of it. But when I first started teaching in Philadelphia, it was just ridiculous. We didn't have decent textbooks. There were no laptops, smart boards. It was just crazy. It was very different from going to a private school or a Catholic school. And the conditions in the schools were not that great. So, that was the first time I went out, because I actually subbed at 2 different times. I subbed from 2001 to 2002. And then I quit because I was like, this is just too hard and I can't do it. And then I wound up writing a journal while I was subbing because I was so frustrated and upset by what I was seeing.
Now, is that the genesis of your book, Sub Inside Notorious School District of Philadelphia?
It is. It is.
Okay.
That's where the book came from. I was actually thinking about writing an article. A friend of mine said, hey, I think this is a book, and you should really keep at it. And so I started working on the book, but didn't finish it. Got caught up in working out in corporate America, in advertising agencies, et cetera. But it always stayed with me. I always followed what was going on with the schools and how they were doing. And there was a lot to follow in Philadelphia and across the US. And following Philadelphia, I began to understand that there were things that were happening, things that were actually playing out across the country in a lot of different large urban school districts. So I just kind of kept track of that. And then eventually I got to a point where I thought, I need to finish that book. I need to go back and finish it, but it's been a while. So I need to go back out and sub again and see if anything has changed. And when I went back out to sub, I found that some things had changed. Some things had gotten better. Some things had gotten worse. Some of the things that had gotten better were there seemed to be more resources, still not enough money to really, make sure that the schools were, that their environments were very clean and environmentally safe. In Philadelphia, we had a huge problem with, and have a huge problem with, asbestos and lead pipes, mold, mildew. Some schools had bug infestations or mice. And, funding is one of the things that affects all that. I found that the teachers, the second time I went out, seemed to be less burnt out, less frustrated, less, trying to figure a way how to get out of teaching, and more dedicated and determined to make it work. But at the same time, there was so much more disruption in the classroom. When I went back out the second time, it was kind of unbelievable. I came from a Catholic and private school background, and that wasn't tolerated in the classroom. School was a safe, calm place, a safe space for you to learn and grow. And I don't think that a lot of the kids who are in large urban underfunded school districts are having that same opportunity.
Now, when you talk about, because I noticed that's mentioned quite a bit, how the classroom is not really kept accountable for discipline and that sort of a thing. What do you attribute that to, other than, let's say, issues at home and no control in school? What would you suggest that needs to be done in an urban environment to mitigate that problem?
That was one of the things that really struck me when I first started subbing. And I had the opportunity to sub at altogether about 67 different schools. I had over 90 assignments. 67 different schools.
Wow.
And I found that disruption was prevalent in the vast majority of those schools. And I didn't understand when I first started subbing, I really didn't understand why. I talked to a lot of teachers, administrators, counselors. I did research. And what I came to understand and to believe is that there's something called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a federal law which dictates that to the maximum extent appropriate, all children with disabilities, whether those disabilities are disruptive or not, managed or not, are to be educated in the general education setting. And for a lot of kids who have disabilities or disorders, that's fine. And they do well and they thrive in that setting and they can grow and learn. But for some kids, and specifically, I'm talking about the children that have emotional and behavioral disorders that are unmanaged and that have learning disabilities that are unmanaged and unaddressed. There have been study after study after study that says that these children do better in a smaller environment with teachers who have specialized training, aides that have specialized skills so that they can support them as they grow and as they learn. But unfortunately, because there's a federal law saying that this, that this is the way it's supposed to be, a lot of those children are funneled into the general education classrooms where it's hard for them to thrive and be successful. And so they wind up not being able to keep up emotionally, socially, academically. And that's hard. That's a lot of stress and pressure on a child. So they, some of them have a tendency to act out, disrupt the class, fight and argue with their classmates, fight and argue with the teachers. Sometimes they resort to violence. They walk in and out of the classrooms, scream and holler and cry. And this goes on sometimes all day long. It happens day after day, week after week, until eventually the kids graduate and to the next grade and they move to the next grade together. But as they move from grade to grade, that learning loss multiplies. By the time they get to middle school, they're behind. And by the time they get to high school, for a lot of them, it's too late to catch up.
All right. I want to go back to something that you said. I mean, because what you're telling me is that, in fact, there can be some of these laws are bad. Now, so first of all, it is correct that these disrupted students don't only disrupt themselves, they probably disrupt their peers as well. And
yes.
Peers as well. Is that correct?
Yes. And that's one of the things. It's like they're holding themselves back and they're also holding back their classmates, and they're making it very difficult for the teachers to teach. Now,
that being the case, having a bad law that you're talking about, why hasn't anything been done about it after we have the experience that shows that it's problematic, not only for the people that's disrupting, but the disruptors?
That's a great question. I don't know that I would say that it's a bad law. I would say that there are some components of it that need to be revised. So primarily what the law is for is to make sure that children with disabilities are able to be included in the classroom settings, that they're not excluded, they're not pushed to the side, that they're getting the things that they need in order to be successful. I think the problem with the law is that it doesn't take into account the disruption that happens when the children are not functioning well in the general ed setting. It's not taking into account the fact that a lot of schools just don't have the funds or the personnel to support those kids while they're in the general classroom setting. And it doesn't allow the schools to determine which of the students are actually doing well in the large, in the general ed setting, and which of the students would do better in smaller specialized classes.
And henceforth, my next question, are these kids the exception? Based on the way you're talking, the exception has almost now become the rule. And if that is the case, what needs to be done or what can be done?
I wouldn't say that they've become the rule. I would say that in the majority of the classrooms I was in, the ones that I was in short term, the ones that I was in long term, it was easier to observe long term that perhaps there might be 2 or 3 kids in that classroom who are very challenging to work with. And then of those 2 or 3, the longer you work with them, you might be able to, establish a relationship, work with their parents, work with the counselors in the schools, and kind of get them to, just start to be able to function well in the classroom. But there might be one child that really is struggling under the burden of whatever their disorder is. That one child can stop the learning process for everyone else in that classroom. If I have to stop teaching a lesson because I have to go pull that kid off of another kid because they're fighting this other kid for no reason, or because they're just constantly disrupting, or they're walking back and forth in and out of the classroom, that's a lot. That stops the process of learning. So you have to ask yourself, how much are those kids losing in terms of education in a single day? Is it 10%, 20%, 30% of their education? And then how does that multiply, and how does that impact them in the long run?
It's amazing because there are so many problems that we have in this society that if kids just had good health care, meaning health care, meaning mental health care, body health care, everything, so much of this wouldn't be an issue. So what would you say you want people who read your book Sub inside the Notorious School District of Philadelphia, which I imagine based on what you've seen, it probably reflects urban schools throughout the country. What would you want folks to get out of that book, and also what would you want them to do based on what they get out of that book?
It's when I first started writing it, what I wanted to share with people is I wanted to share my experience, because as someone on the outside of this, a lot of times, people will look at an underperforming school or some schools that they'll term as failing schools, and they'll be like, well, what's wrong with that school? It's the kids, it's the students, they just can't do any better, or it's the teachers, they're not good teachers, or the administrators don't care. And a lot of times it's none of the above. It's none of the above. At the same time, there is a big problem, and people need to understand what it is. So it's not just, it's that, and it's also the funding situation. And I wanted parents to know that their kids might be dealing with something very difficult on a daily basis at school. And you need to ask your kids what's going on. And you need to ask them every day, because they might have a couple of good days, and then they may have quite a few bad days because of one child or 2 children in their classroom. So parents need to know, and they need to advocate for their kids. And then politicians need to understand the ramifications of the things that they decide. I think in 2004, maybe, they decided to revise IDEA. And what they added is, instead of just making it that children with disabilities could be removed from a classroom if they brought in guns, bombs, or drugs, they added, or if they do serious bodily harm to another child or a teacher. Why are we letting things get to that point where they're doing serious bodily harm? The last assignment I had, the first time I was out, I was there because there was a teacher who had struggled with one child all year long. She kept asking for help. She didn't get the help she needed. And 2 months before the end of the school year, he pushed her backwards over a chair, and she hurt herself really badly. And that's not a rare instance. There are a lot of teachers who have been hit, kicked. I've been hit, I've been kicked, I've been pushed. A lot of teachers go through that. And it's not fair, it's not helpful, and it's not helping to move anything forward.
Based on what you're saying and what you're asking parents to do, it seems like if people simply go ahead and became a bit more engaged in the school system. People are working hard, Clayvon, and the way our society is set up right now, it's just so difficult for people to wear all the hats they have to wear. So we depend on folks, folks that are writing about this, putting this information out there for other people to make decisions. The last question I always ask of everybody who shows up here is, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
I think that one of the other things that I want to put out there for folks, because a lot of people are like, okay, well, that's not my kid's issue. Why should I be concerned about this? Funding is an issue. Achievement is an issue. And if If we could raise the achievement level for Black and Brown students up to the same level as native-born white students, the gross domestic product of the United States would increase by $500 billion a year. They've actually done the calculations for that. If we raise the achievement level of all students in the United States, Black, brown, white, whatever, to the basic level of achievement on the National Assessment for Education Progress, we raised everyone to that level, there would be an increase of $30 trillion in our gross domestic product. That's a lot of money that could circulate in the United States, in our economy, and a lot of money that would help us remain globally competitive, and way more money than we would need to fix and fund all the schools.
Clayvon Harris, writer, teacher, author of the book Sub Inside the Notorious School District of Philadelphia. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Alberto, thank you for having me. I really, truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.